Welcome to the Blogger Genius Podcast, brought to you by Milo Tree. Here's your host, Jillian Leslie.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Blogger Genius Podcast. I'm your host, Jillian Leslie. I am a serial entrepreneur with my husband. We founded Milo Tree, the pop-up app, and Catch My Party. I'm a business coach and a business translator. I take what's working in online business and I dissect it and break it down so you can use these strategies yourself and grow your income. Before I get started, I wanted to ask you, especially if you are liking the podcast, to subscribe to it. We're on iTunes, Spotify, everywhere you find podcasts. You can just search for the Blogger Genius Podcast and subscribe. And this way, you will never miss an episode. For today, I am interviewing my husband, my partner, the best tech guru I know, David. And we are talking about the updates Google is rolling out starting next month. This is called the Google Page Experience Update. And there are some pieces you need to know. So what's great about David is he is so good at taking complex technical jargon and explaining it to you and me. If you are a blogger who cares about serving their audience, creating wonderful content, but does not really like the tech part of blogging, this is the podcast for you because you will know just enough so that you don't end up on your back foot when Google rolls out this update. We talk about page speed and core web vitals and caching and photo optimization. If this all sounds like jargon to you, you are in the right place. So without further delay, here is my interview with my husband and partner, David Leslie. Hi, babe. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. I wanted you to come back on the show to talk about the new Google Page Experience Update.
Yeah, we've been hearing a lot about it.
Yeah, for a long time.
For a long time, but it's now almost upon us.
I feel like there's this anxiety that we're noticing. People are talking about it. Bloggers know there's something coming.
Yeah.
And what is your thought?
Well, we are all like supplicants to the big networks like Google and Pinterest and Facebook. So whenever they make changes, it creates fear because we have no power. Although we do have a little bit of control, and that's the good news. And it's good in this case that Google has been talking about it for a long time and giving tools to measure it so we actually can take some action. So we aren't out of control in this case.
I like that. Okay, so Google then says, hey guys, hey all of you publishers on the internet, we're going to make these changes because we want our experience, people who come to Google and use Google, especially on mobile. Isn't this all for mobile?
It's for mobile and desktop. But
okay.
They care a lot about mobile because most traffic now is mobile.
And so they come out and say, hey, we want the experience for people searching on Google to be super good. We're going to come out with these changes so you know they're coming and you can fix your site so that they perform better, so that the experience overall is better. So would you say these are, I feel like when Google does this, you kind of go, that's good.
It's good and bad. I do feel like they wield a lot of power and they wield it bluntly, and the little guy doesn't have a lot of say in the matter, so we kind of have to go along. At least I think their intent is good. Like
okay.
they want better performing pages for their customers.
Got it. Okay, so if you were to break it down and explain what this update is about, what are core web vitals?
Right. So Google's cared about page speed for a long time. I'm sure anyone who's been blogging for, any amount of time, you've heard about page speed. You care about it. You've got some sort of caching plugin, and page speed is kind of like the objective measure. Like how fast does that page load? So that's like Google's early attempt to say, hey, we care about the experience of our customers when they go to websites. Like, does the page load quickly? Mm-hmm. And it's very simple. Like, how fast does it load? I think that what that doesn't capture is kind of the subjective experience. Like you go to the page, it loads quickly, but it feels weird, it feels wonky, things are moving around. Like, and that's kind of subjective, like the feel. And I think they're trying to quantify that. Like, how can we try to quantify feels weird or feels bad? And they came up with Core Web Vitals.
Okay, wait, before we do that though, you mentioned something called a caching plugin. And I just want you to explain what you kind of said, people have caching plugins on their blog. You recommend a caching plugin for all bloggers?
All bloggers, yes, should have some sort of caching plugin.
Can you explain what that means, what is caching, and what is an easy way to put a caching plugin on your blog?
Like the kind of core basic function of a caching plugin is to make a little copy of your page, right? When you go to a page in WordPress, it has to construct it, right? So that's like that code in the background going, get the post out of the database and get the images and put it all together into an HTML document and sit it down the wire.
Okay.
So a caching plugin just does that ahead of time and creates a copy so it happens faster.
Got it. Okay, so what...
But it gets a little more complicated because there's been feature creep in caching plugins. So they start to do additional things that might help with your page speed.
Okay, what is feature creep? What does that mean?
It means like... We're talking about caching, right? Caching literally means create a little copy of your page that loads faster. But then there are other things too, like optimizing your images or compressing the CSS or JavaScript on your page. They're all combining things. There are all these other little things you can do that will help with page speed that aren't technically caching, but now are features of most caching plugins.
Okay. So what is so I'm a blogger. I've never heard of caching. I've now heard this on the podcast. I don't know what to do. What do I do? Where do I find one? What do you recommend? Is it expensive?
I like WP Rocket.
Okay.
We use it for MiloTree.
Okay. I'll put that in the show notes.
And I like it. There are a lot of good plugins, but they can be very complicated to configure. So I think WP Rocket has a very good balance of, hey, we've got a lot of features, but it's still easy to configure. You can just kind of use the default settings and you're going to be in pretty good shape. When we work with bloggers, a lot of them use SiteGround for their hosting, and we like it, we recommend it. They have a built-in plugin called SG Optimizer, SiteGround Optimizer, that's kind of very comparable feature-wise to WP Rocket.
And you get it for free.
And get it for free. So WP Rocket, I think, is $50 a year. Totally worth it.
Totally worth it.
If you're on SiteGround, it's a nice perk because you basically get all that functionality as part of the hosting service.
So how hard is it to add a caching plugin to your WordPress blog? And this is for WordPress.
For WordPress, yeah.
Okay.
No, it is not that complicated.
Okay. So
there are some plugins, WP Super Cache, they're super powerful and they work well, but you start to look at the options and there's like 50 on a page.
Right.
Like, I don't even know. I don't know.
Right.
Which ones to use, what to turn on, what to turn off.
Got it. Okay, so let's go back then. Okay, so we've covered that. But now let's go back to, you were saying there's this weird feel. So one is site speed, which you can measure. How quickly does the site load? But as it's loading, things can be shifting. And as you say, wonky. It just doesn't feel good.
Yeah. Funny enough, I think Google itself is really bad in their search results, because I don't know if you've ever noticed it. Like they don't always do it, but if you're in a search results page
on mobile, on desktop,
in this case on desktop, you can kind of click on a search result. You'll see a list of results like 1, 2, 3. I'm like, okay, I don't know which one it is. I'm planning to click on 1, go back, hit 2. You click on 1, you go to that page, you click your back button, and I'm going down to hit 2, and all of a sudden, as I'm about to click 2, it drops down like an inch, and they put in like some suggestions based on that first click you made. Ooh. And then I clicked the wrong one by accident. Like, that's exactly what they're trying to avoid by punishing everybody else and making them work on their core web vitals, right? Is things moving around on the page. Ads are a classic reason. Ads tend to load a little more slowly. So you go to like a blog page and you're like, oh, I want to see this recipe. So I'm going to click that jump to recipe button. As you're like moving your mouse over, you're about to click, and suddenly an ad loads in, and that jump button is now below like a big banner ad, and you accidentally click that ad.
And now you're on like, Nordstrom.
Yeah, right. It pops up a window. Pops up a window.
Right.
And then like for the rest of the day, you're seeing see that ad following you around. You're like, come on, that's annoying.
Okay. So Google is trying to avoid this.
Yes.
And there are two acronyms. One is called, and I don't know which one this is, LCP or CLS. So what are these web vitals? And
Right. CLS is cumulative layout shift.
why does Google make such complicated terms? Cumulative layout shift.
So that's exactly what we've been talking about, which is as the page loads, how much do the elements on the page shift around?
Okay.
Right? So like the page loads, it's kind of there, and then as the rest of the assets, the images load, the ads load, maybe a script loads for the recipe plugin, then things move, and they're measuring how much things move.
And they don't like it.
They don't like it. Users don't like it. It's legit not fun.
Okay. What is LCP? And then let's talk about how to fix these or how to know how you're doing.
LCP is largest contentful paint.
Wait. Largest contentful paint.
Yes.
Is contentful even a word?
I don't know. And painting definitely is kind of a euphemism for things drawing on the page, right? If you think of the text appearing, they're talking about it's being painted in.
Wow.
They think of themselves as artists, apparently.
Okay, so how do you know how that works on your site?
Well, again, just let's talk about LCP quickly.
Yep.
That also, they're looking at the viewable area of the page. So they're looking. This applies to both mobile and desktop. Okay. So mobile, like when a page loads, it's what you see on that first screen. For desktop, what you see in the browser window before you scroll. They're going, what is the biggest thing there? Like maybe maybe you have a big header, right? That's the biggest single thing on the page. Okay. Maybe you have a smaller header. You probably should have a smaller header. So more text shows up on the page because people are there for the body of your page. They're like, okay, it's that big H1.
Okay. Which is the header.
The title of your blog post or the featured image, which loads above your post. Like, what is the biggest thing on the page? And like, how long does that take to load? Because the biggest thing on the page is the thing that, in theory, the user is going to see first. So they're going to measure like how long before that thing loads.
How is that different from page speed?
Page speed is a series of measurements, but in effect, that's like how long does it take for the whole page to load?
Okay.
And again, that's broken down into all sorts of small things, like how fast do the images load, how fast do the scripts load. But you can think of page speed as like the page.
Okay.
And this is the thing they're trying to zero in on, which is in the area that you can see when you first go to a page, what's just the biggest thing?
And do you think it's because they want that you come to a blog, let's say, and you can read the heading, you can see the image, like whatever that big thing is comes to life for you. And then the rest of it, well, if it takes a little bit longer, it's okay, because if I am going to read that, I'm going to look at that recipe, I want to see the title or I want to see that image.
Sure, and it's also very closely tied to the layout shift.
Okay, right.
Because if the biggest thing on the page loads slowly, when it does load, it's going to push the other things around to make space for itself.
Got it.
So they're kind of related.
Okay, so now how do I'm a blogger, right? I don't want to focus on this stuff. I want to create beautiful content. What do I need to do to make sure I'm okay?
Google has their Google PageSpeed tool, and they now have integrated the core Web Vitals into that tool.
So you can search for Google.
Just search for Google PageSpeed.
Okay.
Or Google PageSpeed tool. There are a lot of tools for measuring page speed, but I think since we're trying to please Google, it makes sense to focus on using Google's tool.
Okay. And so go there and you type in your URL. Do you type in a page? Do you type in your entire URL? Like, do we go milotree.com or do I go milotree.com/bloggergenius? Like, what do I do?
In theory, every page has its own page speed and core Web Vitals.
Really? Because of if you've got...
Now, what's interesting, if you go to the Google PageSpeed tool, they will tell you kind of an aggregate score for your whole site.
Okay.
So that is important to pay attention to. But when you're trying to work on your own site and manage your own site, you're going to check URL by URL.
Really?
Right. So
as soon as I post something, I should go there and check it?
Absolutely. Or I might start by going to my highest traffic pages.
Ooh, good one.
Right. we talk about that a lot in general, is for a typical blogger, they're getting most of their traffic from a handful of pages that might have, they could be posts that are a year or two old, or, maybe they're newer, but start there. So go to Google Analytics.
Okay.
Find your top 5 pages or top 10 pages and start there to make sure those are performing well.
Now, here is a question, and you talk about this a lot because you are looking at bloggers' page speed, and it goes from like 0 to 100.
Right.
But then you tell me like it's really hard to get really high in page speed, like to get to 95. Is it almost like unrealistic to want to get to a page speed of 95, especially say you're running ads on your page? So where are you comfortable in terms of these scores?
It's a tough question. The hard thing about ads is that they definitely have an impact on,
they slow your site down
on your page speed score, and slowing your site down.
And do they also impact LCP and CLS?
Both.
Really?
Right.
Okay.
So hopefully that's not the largest thing on your homepage. But it might be, yeah. But,
okay.
So maybe more so the layout shift. Like as ads load in, they can push things around, and your overall page, even more so, your overall page speed score
slows down. So
right.
And you always say this: anything you add on your blog will slow your site down. Wait, except Milo Tree. We're going to talk about that.
It's all a series of trade-offs, right?
Okay.
So what is the benefit? Like, I wouldn't say, hey, I'm a blogger and I make my living with ads, so I'm going to take off ads to get a better page score, but I'm not going to make any money.
Right.
You have to balance making money with your page speed.
Okay.
But the hard thing about ads is you do not have a lot of control,
No.
right? You're basically, you're putting yourself out to this very complicated system of auctions and bids and ads and networks, and there's not much you can say like, hey, please go faster.
Right. Right. They're trying, and
they do try.
Okay.
But they're more, I think, focused on optimizing for revenue than
your page speed.
Not your network necessarily. I think AdThrive or Mediafine, they do care about page speed, but there's a much bigger world out there of these networks and these auction systems that aren't necessarily as focused on page speed.
Okay.
And you should be checking with your ad rep, because there are some things that like AdThrive or Mediafine can do with the layout shift.
Okay. So if you're seeing layout shift, definitely reach out to your ad network.
Yes. If you're going to, if you go to, we mentioned the tool, right? Google PageSpeed. You put your URL in, you run it, and it'll tell you exactly what element on your page is the largest contentful page, so you can see it, and it'll tell you which thing is currently causing the layout shift, and it may be the ad. If it is, then you can talk to your network, and they can do things to kind of take those spaces where ads load and kind of solidify it so it doesn't shift as the ad loads.
Got it.
It'll load in blank, or if there isn't an ad to load, it'll load in some content.
Right, like a PSA.
Yes.
Or something like that. Okay, so when you look at numbers, I know I'm going to try and pin you down. When you go, you know what, that's a good enough score, what would you say? Like when you look, because a lot of times I'll give you somebody's blog and go, what do you think of their page speed?
Yeah, it's interesting. In the past, you could also kind of hedge and go, well, maybe they're only scoring a 60, but it feels good because it's not shifting around. So now it's getting more objective, right? I guess you kind of want to be in the green.
Ooh, okay.
And again, I actually don't know what the threshold is for Google in the green, if it's like 65, 70,
okay.
75.
Okay. But let's talk about, though, is it worth it? Let's say I'm at 65 and I'm in the green. Do I want to work to get it to 95?
It's like an unanswerable question. So basically Google's saying, hey, we're going to weigh your scores here in your ranking in the Google search results. One thing I've shown you and other people is like, hey, look, go to Google, do a Google search, maybe one that you're trying to rank for, go to the top couple pages and do the page speed test on their page.
Ooh.
Right? And you can see what I've seen is pages that score terribly rank really high.
Really? So it doesn't necessarily mean that these pages are scoring 97.
It is one of many, many factors Google uses. And up to now, maybe they do penalize those sites, but there are clearly other things they care about more because sites with poor page speed often rank very high.
Really? Okay,
Right,
that's good to know.
It is good to know. Like, hopefully that makes you feel better, but don't let that be like an excuse to not work on your page speed.
Got it. It's all about the content. It's all about how whether people are hanging out on your page, on this post and getting value from it. It's all of these things.
Again, we always talk about trade-offs, and the trade-off here is, we're all time limited. Mm-hmm. So are you going to spend time optimizing your page speed, or are you going to spend time writing a new post, which could do really well? Mm-hmm. And I don't know the answer. I think there's a point of diminishing returns on page speed. Mm-hmm. Like, everyone should be checking it, and you should be doing, making sure you've got a caching plugin, and you can look at optimizing your images. So it's worth spending a little bit of time. But like at the point where you're like at 85 and you're spending 10, 20 hours to get it up to 87 or 89, man, that probably would have been better spent on doing some cool new posts.
Right, doing keyword research, finding what people are interested in, and creating posts. Okay, so low-hanging fruit, caching plugin, optimizing images, which could be
by the way, that's more potentially page speed overall.
Okay.
I don't know if it's going to help with your layout shift.
Okay. So let's say, we talked about CLS, cumulative layout shift.
Yes.
And we talked about, like, if, for example, your ads are moving around, reaching out to your ad network, what else could I do for CLS, which is easier to abbreviate than say?
Right. It starts to get pretty technical, right? Because you basically want to run the tool.
Right, but then I get a 46.
It'll tell you what's shifting.
Oh, okay.
Right.
And so it could be an image. It could be
an image loading slowly. For example, like, let's say you have a really big header and you have an unoptimized image loading and it's really slow, or something like that.
Got it.
So then you could go, oh, it's this image. I'm gonna
take it off. That's what I would do.
You could take it off, right?
That's what I would do.
Or you could optimize it or shrink it or something like that.
Okay.
And then suddenly that will change your score.
Okay.
Or maybe something else will suddenly become the thing that's the biggest thing shifting on your page.
Got it. Okay. Now, what about LCP?
That's just the thing. It's almost more informative, right? It's the biggest thing on the page.
Okay.
So, and you want the thing to load quickly. So again, same thing. If the biggest thing is a big fat image at the top of your post, you might want to optimize that image. You might want to shift things around so
it doesn't show up at the top.
Or text. Again, text always loads fast. Although, again, one other thing that can happen is if you have a lot of fonts, which is that's like a
pet peeve of yours.
It is, because they load slowly, right? So you can have your text load in quickly, and then literally seconds later your fonts will finish loading and it will change the size slightly, right?
So can you explain the difference between your text loading and your fonts loading?
Text is just the literal text content, right? It's coming over the wire.
Okay.
Without a font.
Okay.
Interesting. And then you're saying, I found this really cool script-like font on the internet, and I'm using it, and it might take a second to load. So the text loads first, and then that font loads, and it's a slightly different size, so it makes the whole text area slightly change and move things around.
Okay, and just your advice on fonts. How many fonts should somebody have?
I would say 1 to 2.
Okay. And should they be like Google fonts and just super easy to read? Like, do not go crazy with fonts.
Yes.
If you're focused on your fonts, I think you would say you're in the wrong direction.
Exactly. Really, you're trying to sell your content usually with images and some text.
Content, like you're solving problems.
Right. It's your words that matter, not the little curves on your T. And I know people love script fonts. Right,
okay.
And script fonts are actually particularly bad because they're complicated, so they're a little bigger and a little slower to load.
Got it. Okay, so focus on your content. I wanted to take a short break to talk about MiloTree. We're going to talk about it in this episode and how it will not impact your Google score. It is hard to grow all the things you need to grow in your business to be successful. Think of MiloTree as your partner, as your ally. It will grow your followers while you sleep on Pinterest and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. It'll grow your email list. You can send your audience to a custom link using your pop-up. It is really powerful. Head to milotree.com, sign up for your account, and now back to the show. Here is the question that I think we've gotten, which is, how concerned should I be about this?
We really don't know, right? you want to pay attention now.
Okay.
Look at low-hanging fruit.
Okay.
And then when this rolls out, watch and see. Like if you start to, if you're ranking somewhere and it's starting to go down, then you're like, that's when you're like emergency action.
Okay, so wait. So what I hear you saying is, we don't know. Maybe, probably, like every Google change, some blogs are going to benefit and some blogs will be punished by it. Like you don't know where you're going to fall necessarily on that spectrum.
Right. For all you know, like you're like, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble because I've got like a 40 page score. But for all you know, the page ahead of you could have like a 0 and you might move up with your 40.
Right, exactly.
So
okay. So this is not all good or all bad.
I would say it's neither good or bad. It's just a change.
Okay.
And we can be, like, you want to be prepared for the change.
Therefore, you would say, like, go before it rolls out in May. Look at your top 5 posts before, then wait how long? A month? A week? A day? Or just continually check it?
I would continually check it.
Okay, so you want to check those posts to see now if they are shifting. Like if your best post is showing up on page 1 in the 3rd spot. Now, by the way, that can always be shifting because Google's always testing. So it's not like you're guaranteed, right now you own that spot.
Right. And now, from now on, page speed is a tool that you can use, but also your competitors can use to try to move up or down on the rankings. And again, we don't know how much it's going to have an effect, but it is a tool. So if the person below you is like, oh, we're at 0, hey, we're going to commit hardcore to page speed and
try and bump you off.
Right. It's like, instead of like sniping your key phrase, they might go, hey, we're going to try to compete on page speed.
Oh, interesting. I never thought of competing on page speed, but I guess people on the internet will compete on anything.
Absolutely.
Any way to get an advantage.
Right.
Therefore, keep an eye on your top 5 posts, both now and after this happens.
And, unfortunately, and forever after, right? Because it's not like this happens once and now we're all done.
Right.
Page speed, will continue to be a ranking factor. Your page speed will continue to evolve. Google's going to probably make changes to how they measure it.
Got it.
It's always an evolving landscape.
So this is not a binary thing. Like, phew, I got through that one.
Exactly.
All right. Okay. So keep looking then at those metrics to see how it's going for you.
I think as bloggers we want to be we're content creators, right? I want to be taking beautiful photos. I want to be doing cool projects. Part of the job is having a website that performs well. And so page speed is a little part of your job.
And I would say that it's about just making sure your fundamentals are good, like making sure your host is good and making sure your theme is good and solid. And, it's like the building blocks need to be there, because I think, you would know better than me, but it seems harder to fix those things after you've already put these foundational blocks in place.
Very much so. When people are trying to fix page speed and they have a very low score, it's really hard to kind of incrementally go up. Like the easiest thing to do is hopefully you have like a host where you can set up like a staging site.
Okay.
Right. Like
what does that mean?
Staging site is like a private copy of your website. So
like to test.
So the public can't see it, but you can get in there and work on it and make big changes. So you can take your copy of your site from your live environment, put it in staging, and then push it back.
Okay.
It's much easier to take it into staging and just turn every single thing off. Like just disable every single plugin. You could even switch your theme to like the default WordPress theme. So that'll tell you like the baseline where you're starting from. So then you can start to turn like, I have to have this plugin. I can turn this one plugin back on. I can turn this one on and then keep testing your page speed and go, oh man, this one's killing me. Like this is one I need to replace or get rid of or live without.
Interesting. Okay, this is a great segue to MiloTree. And well, first, what you're saying is some plugins, you've always said this, plugins vary across the board. And plugins are not necessarily optimized for page speed. So
right, they're optimized for
whatever they're doing.
Yeah, whatever feature they're trying to provide.
And these are all built by people or companies or who knows, like MiloTree, built by you.
Right. So
let's then talk about what you look for in a plugin and how you thought about that building MiloTree and the impact that of MiloTree if you're using it on your blog.
Right. Anytime you install a plugin that has some sort of front end functionality that your user sees, not something that's like
manage things in the back.
Right. It's essentially going to add probably some JavaScript.
What is JavaScript?
It's the programming language of the browser.
Okay.
So it kind of adds the interactivity layer in your page.
Okay.
Fun drop downs or pop-ups.
Okay.
CSS, which is style sheets, that's the colors and fonts and those kinds of things.
Okay.
So every time you add a plugin, it's adding these couple extra things.
Okay.
So that's what cumulatively
that's our word.
Yeah. Slows down your site and causes layout shift and affects your overall page speed score.
Got it. So if the plugin does a lot of stuff on the front end, that's usually a bad sign?
Often it is, yes.
Okay. Now, and so I like your idea of setting up a staging site, going through and literally testing every plugin.
Yes.
Now, MiloTree, we offer a WordPress plugin. What will happen if you turn off MiloTree and turn it back on?
You shouldn't see any difference in your page speed score. And in fact, from the beginning, we built MiloTree for Catch My Party.
For ourselves.
And we're like, okay, we want to make it, we're writing it for ourselves. So we care about page speed, so we can be ruthless in trying to make it perform well. And I think we have. And I'm like, okay, now the rubber's hitting the road. Let's test it. Let's make sure we really are. We've tested it all along, but we have these new tools now from Google. So one thing we did we did it at first to validate it for ourselves.
To make sure
it is. So we set up a fairly simple page. It's kind of like a blog post style page. Mm-hmm. And run it through page speed, make sure it's scoring 100.
So this is just the regular page.
Then we add the pop-up to the page, run it through the page speed tool, 100.
You were so excited to show that to me.
Yes.
Okay. So because we have worked, it is really one of our core values, I would say, is performance for ourselves and for our users. I always say, I think you said this first, which is we eat our own dog food. Meaning we're using MiloTree every day for Catch My Party to predominantly grow our Pinterest followers and our Instagram followers. So therefore we care. I love when people email us and go, do you know there's this Google update? And I always want to go, believe me, we so know that because, we make money with Catch My Party.
Right. We know it as bloggers and we know it as MiloTree,
selling a product.
A product for blogs.
Absolutely. I mean, when we created MiloTree, we didn't think about it as a company, a separate company. We did it for ourselves. And then we're like, hey, if this is working for us, we could offer this to other publishers,
yes,
other content creators. And so that was really the light bulb moment for us. Okay. Therefore, what I will do in the show notes is put a link to the page that you are very proud of that will show that MiloTree does not in any way slow down your site. Now, one thing that people a lot of times ad networks will say take plugins off, and we get lumped into that category.
I know, very annoying.
But
so they're legitimately responding to the ecosystem of plugins, which tend to slow sites down, and some plugins are great and some are terrible.
Right.
So they don't know, and they don't
they're not doing the site speed.
There's probably 100,000 plugins, so or I don't know the tremendous number of WordPress plugins. It's the great thing about the WordPress ecosystem is the huge amount of choice, but the downside is the quality is there's every possible quality from it will destroy your website to it will make your website much better.
Yes. And also for MiloTree, we work really well with ad networks. You can have your pop-up show above your ads. Your ads will load first. Like, we work with these platform or these ad networks to say, hey guys, we want to play really well with you. And I think we've done a good job.
Sure. And again, because we haven't ad monetized website ourselves, we're
very sensitive to that.
Exactly.
We use AdThrive for Catch My Party, so we are very sensitive to what their needs are, and therefore what you can accomplish with MiloTree.
Right. When we first wrote the pop-up for ourselves, it popped up from the bottom of the page. And it wasn't too long after that the kind of sticky footer ad became the norm.
And where people make the most money.
Yes. So then we moved the default position of the pop-up from the bottom right to the right side, a little higher than where the footer would show, so they didn't interfere with each other.
Yeah. So we're very conscious of that, especially on mobile.
For sure.
We do that. So good for you, David, for building that. So you're a blogger, right? You love making beautiful things. You love serving your audience. Now you got to think about this. How freaked out would you be?
I don't think I would be that freaked out. Like when Google rolled out the page speed algorithm change, not the current cumulative layout shift, Core Web Vitals, but just the page speed.
And when was this, would you say?
I don't know how long. It's been several years.
Okay.
Like, it didn't seem like there was a huge reshuffling at that point. Like, and again, like as I mentioned earlier, we see pages with very poor page speed rank very highly. So again, I just think it's another piece of the puzzle.
So it's not the end all be all. Like, I've been seeing so many, in Facebook groups and my emails of
it is appropriate to pay attention. And again, as we've said in the past, it often causes just like a reshuffling. But that does mean certain people might end up losing rank. So, be prepared and be ready to respond. And that's the point. If you lose ranking, you need to then step in and be ruthless and consider, like, hey, it's like the beauty of my homepage isn't the number one priority. I need to emphasize page speed, so I should be using a simpler theme. I should be cutting down on my fonts. I need to pay attention to optimizing my images.
Yes, I think that is really good advice.
There was one thing
Please.
one tip if I could leave people with.
Please.
Which is to be really careful about PNGs.
How would you think about them? And could we talk about Canva?
Exactly. I was going to mention Canva. So they're just different ways to compress images. Images could be really big. JPEG's a way to shrink image size. And it works very well on photos. It's designed for complicated images. Photos, lots of gradients, lots of colors, lots of complexity. They compress really well. PNG tends to work better for like cartoon images. Like, hey, it's
like graphics.
Yeah, text on a single color background might compress a little smaller or look a little better as a PNG. But the one thing about PNG, so we're talking about compression. Compression means you might lose a little bit of quality from the original. And that's an important trade-off because you might save 90% of on-page size for like 1% in quality.
Got it. Okay.
But, if you're a designer, you're like, I want 100% quality.
Right. And also, wait, if you were saving something to go to the printer and print it, you want high quality.
Exactly.
But on the internet, you are willing to sacrifice quality. You should be willing to sacrifice quality for speed.
Right. So the thing I think catches people is you're using Canva, which is an amazing tool.
Amazing. And
we use it.
Yep.
And it's great for putting together like your Pinterest images.
Oh my God.
Laying text on. I think by default it's going to save it as this 100% quality PNG image. So that image is going to be like 2 megabytes, 3 megabytes. And if you save it as a JPEG, it might be 100 kilobytes. So you're saving like 98% in size. So people go to Canva, they make their Pinterest image. By default, it will save as JPEG if you tell it to.
Because it looks... no, I think it's like the default is just PNG.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The default is PNG. It has the capacity. If you dig in there in the menu and drop it down and save it as JPEG,
yep,
you can. But they're optimizing for image quality as you save. So people take that PNG, 100% quality, then put it in their post as their pinnable image, that's huge. That'll be like as big as the whole rest of your page combined. So that's just one thing. If I could leave you with one little tip, I see that all the time, is these huge PNGs.
Yeah, and you noticed it showing up, and you're like, why are all these people saving their files as PNG, saving their photos? And I think it was because Canva's default is a PNG, and for web, you want to make sure that's a JPEG, unless it is something like,
if you're putting it into like an ebook layout, or there might be. Not even ebooks. Ebook should be JPEG.
No, something you're gonna print.
Right, iBook, and you're gonna send it to the printer. You want like as high a quality as possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yes,
like if all this is, you're like, oh my god, I'm so confused. JPEG, PNG, I don't even know what you're talking about. Just if you're that person, use JPEG 100% of the time.
Yep. So definitely go back in your site, especially if you're seeing when you do these core web vital. When you put your site through that and you notice these big images.
When you run your Google page speed test on a page and there are PNGs like this, it will highlight it in a list.
Okay.
And say, hey, these images could be optimized. And you'll go, okay, there's one.
Yep.
If you're seeing images on your site that are over, a few hundred kilobytes, you probably have a big opportunity to optimize by saving it as a JPEG or upping the compression level.
So you would have to then take that image, resave it as a JPEG, re-upload it to your blog.
Yes, or potentially there are some tools inside.
Some plugins.
These are back-end plugins, so they tend not to affect the front end.
Mm-hmm. Where you can convert PNGs to JPEGs.
You can convert PNGs to JPEGs. You can recompress JPEGs. Again, I'm familiar with the SG Optimizer because we work with SiteGround a lot. They have a tool that will re-optimize all your images, and there's a yet another format that Google in particular supports in their Chrome browser called WebP. Okay. So it'll make WebP copies of all your images on your behalf.
And that's okay.
Which is great that Google likes that.
Okay. Awesome. I posted in our Become a Blogger Genius Facebook group and asked people if they had questions for you. So I just want to run through these questions and see what your answers are. Okay, so the first one is it hard to get my page speed insights above 65 on mobile? And is that a problem?
It totally depends, right? Depends on your theme, how many fonts you have. Are you running ads? Like if you've got a heavy theme, if you've got tons of plugins, you're using like a page builder. Like page builders are kind of notorious at adding a lot of code to your front end, even when you're not using them on that particular page, right? Let's say you're building landing pages in Elementor, and then some of that overhead's going to trickle over into your blog pages, even though you're not using it for your blog pages.
Okay. Now, are your rankings different on desktop and mobile? And do you see like typically page speed is lower on mobile versus desktop? What is your thought about that?
There's a separate score for desktop and mobile, and it is harder. Like it's a little harder to rank higher in mobile than desktop.
So you will forego like a lower mobile score than say, like, will you go, well, it's mobile, so it will show up typically lower?
Yes.
Okay.
Again, not that you should necessarily be satisfied with where your mobile score is.
Right.
But
assume that your mobile score will probably come in lower than your desktop score.
Yeah. So if you're not running ads and you're, getting a low score, it is on you. It is your choice in theme. It is your choice in the plugins you have. So you need not be satisfied with a low score.
Okay. That's good to know. All right. Another question.
So just to the specific, is it hard? It may very well be hard, right? Because you do have to go through that process of figuring out why is it that it's slow. And we're talking about simple page speed score. It can start with your host. Right? If you're going, hey, I've got such a good deal on hosting, I'm paying $1 a month, there are some things there that you're probably not getting in terms of the speed of the host itself that's going to put you on your back foot for page speed from the start.
So those hosts, and we won't necessarily name them, that are very cheap, you're paying for it in some other way.
Yes, you pay for it in page speed.
Okay,
and again, there are some things you can do. That's where a caching plugin might help, because instead of the host having to put together your pages, the caching plugin kind of takes a copy, and that can help. But even so, that might affect your page speed.
That's interesting. Okay, so definitely think about that. The host we really like is called SiteGround, and just when you build sites for people, that's typically where we put them.
We like it because there are more expensive hosts that are probably a little better, but for us, like SiteGround is a nice balance of not that expensive, good performance, and the built-in caching plugin, or the caching plugin you get for free, which covers a lot of the things we're talking about, like image optimization, caching, doing things with your JavaScript and CSS, the minification and combination.
This is where you lose me. Okay, second question. Should blog posts include a video? And if so, what size and length would you recommend? So I have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's not specifically a site speed question, but it definitely relates, because embedding a YouTube video in your blog can affect your page speed, because there's like a lot of overhead that can come with it.
Now wait, but here I'm gonna break this down. One thing you can do is embed a YouTube video. The other that people seem to want to do is add it to their media library and have it like live on their blog. What is your thought?
Well, again, that's getting away from page speed. I don't know. For me, since the context, the meta of this podcast is how do we please Google? Mm-hmm. I think YouTube videos probably pleases Google.
That's what I was going to say.
I would lean towards YouTube just for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
Using the basic YouTube embed functionality can add some overhead. So there are tools, I think WP Rocket does it, where it'll swap out the actual embedded video for a thumbnail of the video. Oh. And then when you click on the thumbnail, it automatically loads the video. That's like a good way to manage the site speed aspect of embedding a video.
Got it. Or you could just take a screenshot of the video, put it in as an image, and link it to the video.
Yes. The advantage of like the WP Rocket method is you can still click on it and it will play in place. Oh, okay. So it'll like kind of dynamically swap that thumbnail.
Got it. Okay. And for YouTube, it's so funny because you want to, if you are trying to grow your YouTube channel, typically around 10 minutes is what I continue to hear in terms of optimized videos, but you do want to watch to make sure people aren't dropping off. Also, because again, you were saying that you could have a low site speed score on a post and it still ranks really well. Part of that could be you've got a really compelling video on the page. People come and they watch your video. So that's one of the video. People really like video. I do. If you can recommend if you can add a video to a blog post, do it.
I agree.
Okay.
And again, I think we talked earlier, like there's always a trade-off, right? So I think if you have good video content, definitely embed it in your blog. Right.
Yep.
That even if it does cost you a tiny bit on page speed.
Yep. And then our last question, which I think we answered, is this change supposed to reduce your blog traffic? And why? And is there any way to stop that? I would say,
like I wouldn't say that in general, that blanket statement that it's not supposed to reduce your blog traffic. It's just supposed to make a better experience for people who use Google. And if you have a page or a site that has very poor page speed, it could lower your blog traffic, but you could be rewarded.
Totally. And I think that the best way to think about sites like Google or Facebook or Instagram is how can you make those platforms happy, and it's typically by thinking about what their objective is. So if Google wants search to be a really good experience, that's what they're optimizing for. So if you can align yourself with that.
Right. And also just to loop back to the very beginning, which is Google's trying to come up with an objective way to quantify something subjective, which is how does the page feel? So start there, though, yourself with subjectively looking at your own site. And it's hard, because you live so close to it. One thing we always say is like, as content creators, we look at our site on desktop all the time, but somewhere between like 70 and 90% of your users are looking at your site on your phone. So get on your phone and like get out of your house so you're not on Wi-Fi, but get out so you're using your cell phone connection and go to your own website And then if it feels bad, you might not have noticed, and you get on your phone and you're like, gosh, actually this is kind of annoying. So that's when you really want to know, like, subjectively, I'm feeling bad about my own site, and do something about it. You come to your own site and you're like, actually, this is good. Like, I don't care what Google says. This feels right. Then I wouldn't be as worried.
If people have questions, how can they reach out to you?
You can email me at david@milotree.com.
And one thing that's really nice is I think you're really good at explaining stuff. But
I'm in the Facebook group as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So in the Become a Blogger Genius Facebook group, if you have a question and it's technical, you could say, hey, David. It's always fun to have you on the podcast. So hopefully we'll do this again soon. And I love you, and thanks for coming on the show.
I love being here.
I hope this clarified a bunch of technical questions you might have had. If you have more questions, please reach out to David at david@milotree.com, or add your questions in the Facebook group. And if you have not joined our Facebook group, please do. It is called the Become a Blogger Genius Facebook group. You can find us on Facebook really easily. And I will see you here again next week.